Hi, I'm Deanna Nielson. I'm studying to be an art teacher. Today I'm going to show you how to make stamps out of potatoes. So stamping is related to printmaking, which is a really fun kind of art. In printmaking, you create an image, you transfer onto a matrix, so that can be a metal plate, a wood block, knolling block, something like that. You put ink over top of it, and then you transfer the image to a piece of paper. And so I'll show you a few examples of that. So you can use styrofoam to do a home version. So that's how I made this one. This one is using an intaglio process, so you use an acid to etch the image into the metal plate. That one's a little harder to do at home because you need more materials, but it's really cool to look at. And then this one's using lithography, and you use a metal plate or a stone, and you use a chemical process to create and transfer the image. So I have the plate that I used to make that, so I wanted to show it to you. So using a chemical process, I transfer the image onto here, and you can see that the image is reversed. That's what happens in a lot of printmaking processes and in stamps, is I have this plate, I have the image ready to go, I ink it up, put this piece of paper on, and then with lithography, you roll it through a printing press, and that presses the ink into the piece of paper. Some of these processes, like I said, you can do at home. A few other things you can use a wood block. There's certain kinds of wood that are really great for making woodcuts, which is a type of printmaking. You can also use a linoleum block and carve into that. So both these you carve into it. And some of the other processes, like I said, you use acid or chemical processes to make these prints. So it's really awesome. And today we're going to make a simple version of that. So you don't quite need all the materials. What you need is a potato that you're going to cut a design into, cover with paint, and then you're going to stamp it onto a piece of paper. So I created this little image right here using those two stamps that I just showed you. So you can see I repeated it. And you can see I started here, and you can see the ink's really dark there, and then it gets lighter as I go, and then I switch to the other stencil, the other block. And so you can play around with that when you make your stamp. You can play around with repeating it, how much paint you put on there, all that sort of stuff. So now I'm going to show you how to make your stamp, and then you can have fun and make your stamp and stamp away. Okay, to make your stamp you need a few things. You need a potato. Mine's a little bit old, not really good to eat anymore. As long as it's not rotten inside, you can still use it for stamps. If you're going to use some nice potatoes, make sure you ask your parents first to make sure that's okay with them. You're going to need something to cut the design and scoop it out with. So I've got a butter knife, a real knife, and a spoon. We'll see what works best. It will probably depend on how hard your potato is. So if you're going to be using a knife or anything sharp, make sure you have parental help or an adult around to help you. Make sure you don't cut yourself, because that would be bad. You're also going to need some paint, and I spread mine out on a piece of wax paper. You can use foil, parchment paper, anything like that. You're going to want a surface big enough that you can dip the stamp into. So you're going to dip it into the paint. So you want to spread it out nice and wide. So you're going to start by just cutting into potato and cut flat down. Like I said, make sure you get help if you need it. It's never a bad idea. Okay, so I've cut my potato in half. And what's going to make it a little bit easier is you see on these, I made it so I just have a wedge. That'll make it safer for when you're cutting it. So I'm going to take my half and then cut the end off. So now it's flat on both sides. So now when I'm cutting it, it can rest flat. I'm going to do that to both of my stamps. And you could make multiple stamps from one potato, and that would be awesome. They could be different sizes. I'm just going to make two for right now. You can make as many as you can safely do. Okay, so I've got my potato pieces. Now what you're going to do is cut a pattern into it. So you can use a real knife, like I said. You can use a butter knife. I have a butter knife with a bit of a serrated edge, so that makes it really easy to cut with. My potato's kind of soft, so it's easier to carve. So I'm just going to use this. And now this is the part where you get to be a little creative. So think of a pattern or something, a simple image that's easy to draw. Because you can't get super detailed on the potato, you want to do something simple. And so I'm going to do some jagged lines on this one. And that'll be a little bit hard for you to see. So I just cut some jagged lines. You can see that a little bit. And that's what I did on this one. I just cut into the surface. I didn't remove anything. On this one, I did remove some of the surface. So I think it's fun to try both. So if you just cut into the surface, make sure your cuts are nice and deep. So this one's ready. If it's a little wet, you can just kind of pat it. All right, and this one I'm going to cut some of the surface out, so then it's more like this one where only part of the stamp gets paint and only part of it, and then part of it doesn't get paint. So again, you can take some time and come up with a really cool pattern. I'm just going to do something simple so I can show you. So I'm just going to make a really simple pattern and cut some out. Okay, so I've cut this basic pattern, and I'm going to take my spoon and I'm going to take and cut some of the pieces out, just like that. And so you want to be careful of this and make sure you cut your lines beforehand, so then it's easy to just remove the parts you want to remove. And if your potato's a little harder, you might want to just use a knife or something for this. Just make sure you're being safe. Okay. So I just removed random parts of that to create an interesting design. So now my stamps are ready to stamp. So I'm going to get my piece of paper. So I'm just going to flip this one over and use the back because I can. Why not? Alright, so I have some paint prepared. Here you can switch out your colors. You can create a blend of colors. You can just do one color. I'm going to dip my potato into my paint. And so I've got a lot of paint there, so I might just dab it a little bit to get off some of the extra paint. There you go. And now it's ready to print. And so you're just going to put it onto your piece of paper. I know you can't see that perfectly, so I'll show you. So I put it onto the piece of paper. I'm going to lift up the potato. And you can see that's kind of an interesting pattern. I'm going to do it a few more times. And doing this can help you see about how much paint you want to use. So I think I like the paint of the middle one best. So I put too much paint on the first time. And so that's a good thing to practice when you're using your stamp, is figure out before you make a nice final one that looks really cool, figure out how much paint you want to use. And try to get it so it's evenly spread. Okay, so now I've got my next stamp. And with this one I cut into the surface, if you remember. So what you can do is kind of spread out the sides when you stamp this, because then you'll see the pattern a little bit more. So I'm going to push the sides and the back a little, and I'm just going to stamp it like I did before. And so you can see something interesting in these. I didn't cut any part out, but my potato's not perfectly flat, and so you get a little indent. Whereas in this, you didn't see that really. And so there's a lot of things you can do. You can purposely make it at an angle so only parts print. You can cut different parts out. You can make all sorts of different patterns. You can use different colors. You could print the same stamp in different colors. So there's a lot of fun things you could do. So now it's your turn to create something. So go get a potato, make sure you're being safe, and create some interesting patterns, and then stamp them and make a really cool artwork. So I'm excited to see what you guys come up with, and I hope you have lots of fun.